Hey there, Quillers. Jake Lloyd here, producer of Don't Quill the Messenger and co-founder of Dragon Wagon Radio. I just wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about my debut feature film, Pinch. Pinch is the story of two strangers brought together by the chance to own a rare and valuable sports collectible. But to do so, they're tasked with stepping out of their comfort zones and onto a baseball field. It is a story about marriage, family, how we define success, and how sometimes it's hard to look beyond our own insecurities. I made Pinch with no budget, no crew, just a ton of heart, and I am thrilled to share it with you. It's available for rent or purchase digitally on Prime Video. Visit pinchmovie.com and follow @pinchmovie on Instagram for more info on this charming little movie that means the world to me. Thank you so much for listening to Dragon Wagon Radio. I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Don't Quill the Messenger. Cue the music. It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
And welcome back, Quillers, to another episode of your favorite podcast. This is Don't Quill the Messenger, and we are excited for today's episode to welcome Daniel Stephen Crafts. He's an Emmy-winning composer who wrote for legendary opera star Jerry Hadley until Hadley's untimely death in 2007. Their first collaboration was a setting of poetry by Carl Sandburg, The Song and the Slogan. It premiered in the year 2000 and was made into a TV program for the PBS network and hosted by TV personality David Hartman. What else this guy does, though, is he is the originator of a genre of opera called Gonzo Opera, which combines classically trained voices with social political satire. Sounds a lot like what we might get out of Gilbert and Sullivan to some degree. We'll talk to him about that in a minute as well. But here's a super cool thing he does. He teaches a class on the Shakespeare Authorship Question at the University of New Mexico through their extension program. He's taught the class multiple times, and he's going to be scheduled to teach it again very soon. And we're going to talk to him about that as well. Daniel, welcome to the program. So glad to have you.
Hey, Stephen, I'm delighted to be here.
So many things that I'm so curious about that I want to share with our listeners, our Quiller Nation out there. Let's first begin by touching on a little bit of Gonzo Opera. Can you give me an idea, a little bit of clue of exactly what that means, what that is? Am I right when I compare it to Gilbert and Sullivan, or no?
Absolutely. That is absolutely what it is. Well, it's a kind of a funny thing. Years ago, I was having dinner with my friend Shannon Wheeler in San Francisco. And he is the originator of the comic strip, Too Much Coffee Man. And we were thinking, wouldn't it be fun to do something together? But what would we do? He writes comic books and I write serious classical music. Mm-hmm. So the idea of an opera on Too Much Coffee Man came up, and we both thought it was a terrible idea. But a few months later, Shannon had a dream that his characters were singing opera to him. So he got up in the middle of the night, jotted down some couplets and sketched out a basic scenario, sent it to me. I thought it was hilarious, but I had no idea what we'd ever do with it. So I wrote it really just for fun. It was great fun doing it. And he's up in Portland, Oregon. He got the Portland Center of Performing Arts behind it. They hired people from the Portland Opera, put it on, and it becomes this, to everybody's surprise, a great hit. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks. It ran for 3, would have run for 4, but the theater was booked. But then, this is the thing, then he takes it down to Comic-Con, the gigantic comic book festival in San Diego.
Yes, I'm familiar, absolutely.
And it was a hit down there. If you can imagine that, doing an opera at Comic-Con. And people kept coming up and saying things like, I thought I hated opera, but this is great. So from there on, I started working with a number of librettists, writing these satirical operas, and we came up with the name Gonzo Opera, basically. and it's really taken off, and it has been great fun. It's just enormous fun for everybody,
Now,
performers and
if I wanted
audience.
to find a sample of that, do you have anything out there, like on YouTube or somewhere
Absolutely.
where I could find a sample of that to have a better grasp of what you're talking about?
Just go to YouTube and type in Gonzo Opera, and the YouTube channel will come up.
Oh, perfect. That's easy enough, isn't it?
And there's all there's stuff from various different productions. Lots of Too Much Coffee Man, but there are 12 and counting Gonzo operas at the moment. And I have librettos coming in from several other people that I'm waiting for.
And when you finish these, do you produce them yourself? How does that work?
Yes, that's what we have done. Well, the first time when we did it, the very premiere of Too Much Coffee Man was presented by the Portland Center for the Performing Arts.
Uh-huh.
But I have taken to directing them myself, actually, in the last few years of doing them. And we've done them all over everywhere, mostly in the West, but we actually got it to an off-Broadway production a few years ago.
Wow, you are quite the jack of trades, my friend. You're a busy man.
I try. Have to keep interested, have to keep busy.
I love that you said that you had people who were coming up and saying, I thought I hated opera. I get that a lot with my Shakespeare productions
Yes.
When I produce and direct a Shakespeare play, I often have audiences who will come to me and say, I thought I hated Shakespeare, but after seeing this show, I really love Shakespeare.
That is the greatest compliment that you can get.
Isn't it? It really is. And it truly, it always kind of makes me tickle inside when somebody comes up and says that to me, because it truly is a compliment to the entirety of the production, in the sense of all of the artists who are bringing the story to life in a way that speaks to the audience in a way that they've never had before in a Shakespeare production. I think that's important. And, one of the things I always say to people who say they hate Shakespeare is I say, well, Shakespeare is the most maligned playwright ever, because people will go and see a really bad production of Shakespeare and say, I hate Shakespeare. I didn't understand it. I can't understand any of it. Don't like it. All that language, all these weird characters, forget it. I'm never going again. And they blame the writer instead of the quality of the production. Nobody goes to a Neil Simon play and sees a really bad production of Neil Simon and blame it on Neil Simon and go, oh, I hate Neil Simon. I'm never going to go see another Neil Simon comedy. So it's not fair. Shakespeare gets a bad rap because of bad performances of his work. And that's unfortunate. I think if he were alive today watching some of the things that go out there, he himself would cringe at some of the productions, because I do believe, as I mentioned in a recent podcast episode, I do believe that he was indeed an accomplished director himself.
Yes, undoubtedly he was. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's also completely true in music. Hearing a bad performance of a piece, and people can think, oh, this is a really lousy piece, but it's just a bad performance. So, yeah, we are at the mercy of interpreters.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I love the way that you put that, and that's true about composers. It's true about playwrights. It certainly can be true about all art in that sense, right? When a painter creates a painting and thinks it's fabulous and wonderful, that doesn't mean that the person who walks by it while it's hanging on the wall is going to enjoy it or even interpret it, as you say, the way that it was intended by the artist.
Right. Well, at least they have the advantage of there's no mediation there. People see what they actually painted, but we as theater artists always have to have interpretation intermediaries.
And it's one of the things that I love about live performance of any kind is that it's, the only type of art where the artists and the audience are having a mutual experience at the same time. So if I create a sculpture and then people come and see the sculpture and enjoy it, they're not connecting with the artist at that time unless they were there while it was being sculpted. Whereas with performance art, though, it's happening mutually. The artist is having their experience, the audience is having their experience all together at the same time. And that's one of the things that I love about what I do and being in front of audiences. And when I'm not on the stage, when I've just been the director of the show, when I've been the director of the show, one of my favorite things to do is to sit in the very back and watch the audience and the actors have that shared experience together while it's playing out on the stage,
Do you know, I do exactly the same thing.
Do you?
Yes.
And then do you also do a little nail biting or hair pulling or teeth gnashing when it doesn't quite go the way it's supposed to go?
Well, I've been fortunate enough that I have singers, performers whom I trust. And I know by the time we actually get it to performance, I know exactly what they're going to do. And that takes a lot of pressure off tremendously. But I've been fortunate enough to work with really good people that I can trust. So I can pretty much relax usually.
That's super important, and truthfully on a lot of levels, and it's one of the reasons why you see so often throughout film history of directors and actors who work together again and again and again.
Right.
I like to work with the same artists over and over again when I can, especially not only because you have that familiarity and that trust, as you say, but you also, I find that you start to speak the same artistic language.
Yes.
And so you develop a shorthand between each other that makes the process faster, cleaner, and more efficient.
Yes. I like to begin with letting the singers, in my case, show me how they want to interpret the roles. And I know what they choose to do is something that they know they can do really well. And usually that works out really well as a collective process. Mm-hmm. Unless somebody goes too far in some direction, you can pull them back. And if they need more ideas, I usually have ideas for them. But it's better. It's so much better. I'm sure you've found this too. It's so much better when it's a collective process.
Yes, absolutely. And the best thing any director could ever want is to have to pull somebody back. I always tell performers it's so much easier to say, okay, we've gone too far, let's take it down a notch or let's pull it back a bit, than it is to have to keep pushing them to give you what you need or give you what you want.
Absolutely. Fortunately, I've never had that problem with these crazy comedies. It's usually just things getting out of hand a little bit too much.
Well, opera singers are over the top just by nature, aren't they?
Absolutely. In the best possible way.
Let's shift gears a little bit now. I'd like to talk about this class that you teach at the University of New Mexico. How long have you been doing that?
Oh, for about 4 years now, I guess.
Okay, and I want to say you told me that you've taught it about 3 or 4 times now. Is that about right? Is that accurate?
Yes.
And about how many students attend each time?
Oh, I usually have anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen.
Oh, okay. So pretty decent size class size.
Yeah, usually. And it's interesting. One of the things I do is that I look, the first time I taught it, I got about halfway through thinking that I'm presenting this problem to them for the first time. And it turned out most all of them were at least marginally familiar with the authorship question and just wanted to have more information. So I've taken to at the beginning of the class saying how many people are familiar with this problem. And it's almost always, it is always the majority of people who are already familiar with it. So that's
incredible. That's great. I mean, I think that would surprise me as well, but it does stand to reason that if they're taking this class, they must have some kind of knowledge of something or some sort of awareness, or why would they even be interested?
Right.
So
right.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
And what do you generally find? So how long is the class?
2 hours.
So it's one 2-hour session.
Yes. Right.
Okay. So it's not like a semester long course or that kind of a thing. This is done through the university extension program. Is it more like a lifelong learning type of a situation? Like
yes, exactly.
So what are the age range usually of the students who attend?
Oh, geez. I'm very bad at ages. I don't know, anywhere from 30 to 70, maybe.
Okay. So a pretty wide swatch of...
Yes, a pretty wide range of people interested. Yeah.
What kind of reactions do you get to the class from people who attend?
Very positive. Very positive. I think I've only had one negative review in the whole time that I've done it. And that was somebody, I guess, who just was adamant that the traditional story was correct and everything else was wrong. But anyway, but one of the things I say to begin with at the class, this is, I'm sure you may feel the same way, Stephen. I'm always a little bit hesitant to call myself an Oxfordian. And let me explain, because as of today, what is this, August 14th, 2021, as of today, what we know, all of the evidence, given that I don't see how it's possible that anybody other than Edward de Vere could have written the plays. But that doesn't mean that tomorrow there couldn't be found by somebody a treasure trove of information pointing in a different direction. Now, I don't believe that that's going to happen, but if it did, I would welcome it, because it would be more information and it would be getting us closer to the truth. And I point out that it's kind of a human failing that people frequently see or find what they want to find. And I said, in my case, what I want to find is the truth. I really don't care ultimately what it turns out to be. I just want to know for a fact that it is the truth. And I think that's exactly how most Oxfordians or authorship skeptics, I think that's how most of us feel. I think it's true. I do feel like, and that is also, I think, the position, well, not that I think, I know it is the position of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, is that it's about finding the truth. It's about getting at the true facts. And I believe that most of the people in this movement are truly focused on that. And I agree with you. If a treasure trove of information popped up that said, P.S., we were all wrong all along, it's actually Francis Bacon, we would all embrace that and say, okay, well, here we go. Here's some proof now. And now we have to put those pieces of the puzzle together and figure out how this all happened. So yeah, I agree with you on that. I think there are some people who have become emotionally married to certain theories and certain arguments that they are on the border or have already crossed over the line into that world that most Stratfordians live in, which is, this is how it is. You can't tell me anything other than this. This is how it was. And this is what I believe, and I'm sticking to it. And it always saddens me when I see skeptics, doubters, Oxfordians take that hard line position and sort of, I don't want to say become the enemy, but certainly become more like our adversaries than like our allies. And that's unfortunate. Yeah, absolutely. You really have to question everything. And anything that you consider beyond question, your mind is closed, and you may not be able to find out what the truth really is because of that mindset.
And so the students who come into your class obviously come in knowing that that's what the class is going to be about, and that it's going to ask them to do critical thinking and to come in with an open mind and to ask these questions. So do you find...
Yes, well, I want to make sure that they know that is my position, that I'm not saying this is the truth and, I have the keys to the castle, but that in fact, this is an inquiry.
That's great. And as you well know, that's, the purpose for this podcast series and the theme of every episode is
absolutely
we're asking questions.
I love your subtitle. Let's go ask some questions.
Thank you.
That's what it's all about. One of the things that I present at the beginning of the class, it's how I became aware of the authorship question.
Sure.
Years ago, there was a nationally syndicated newspaper columnist by the name of Sidney J. Harris. And apparently, he had published a column doubting the authorship of the Stratford Man. And apparently, he had gotten all sorts of hate mail from English professors.
Go figure.
Now, I say apparently because I never saw the original column that he wrote. What I found was the follow-up. And the follow-up, I'll read you just a little bit of it. He titles it Some Naughty Questions for Shakespeare Fans. And he says, in response to the many readers who wrote taking issue with my column on the identity of William Shakespeare, I'd like to propose the following game of 20 questions to see how many of them they can answer satisfactorily. I am convinced that none can be fully and frankly rebutted by any of the Shakespeare experts, quote unquote, those scholars and annotators and English professors who are blindly convinced that the semi-literate actor and greedy stage manager named William Shakespeare wrote the plays and poems that are erroneously attributed to him. And then he goes on with 20 questions, and the questions that I'm sure your listeners know very, very well. Things like, how did he get his knowledge of foreign countries, of foreign languages? Why are there no letters that he wrote? Why did not one contemporary historian mention Shakespeare? All of those sorts of things. And even today, we could probably add another half a dozen major questions
at least.
to
Sure.
them. Yeah, not to mention all the minor points as well. So now, and I hold this, I still have the column that I cut out many years ago. It's all yellowed and and withered. And the date on it is July 1974. So that goes back a long ways.
Yeah. And that I'm certain that that's probably somewhere in the record of references that I know has been compiled with regards to documents and people who have mentioned the authorship question. And a lot of people don't realize how long this debate has continued and how old this debate truly is. And that's one of the things that I commonly try to point out to people. And I wonder, when you are teaching your class, do you touch on the history of the authorship question, or do you just focus more on the question itself?
Well, both. In the first half, I basically go into all the arguments about why the Stratford Man just doesn't fit. Why it's a great story and everybody loves it. Hey, the kid from the sticks comes to the big city, makes out well, has great success. It's a wonderful story. It's just, it doesn't fit the facts. And so that's another thing that I point out. I say that the one thing that I know for absolute certain is this is a very, very complicated question. And what I'll try and do in the next 2 hours is simplify some of the problems that are encountered and some of the research that has been found, but don't expect simple answers, unfortunately. That's one of the problems on our side, is we don't have a simple narrative to present. But it's realistic because life isn't simple. Life is messy. Life is complicated. That's realism.
That's very true. And I think so. I like that. I like your philosophy there. And my good friend John Shahan of the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition would agree. He would agree that the first thing we need to do is eliminate the Stratford Man from the picture, so that once people have determined, okay, it definitely could not have been this guy, then that leads to the inquiry and the natural question of, well, if not him, then who? Who stole the cookies from the cookie jar? Not me. Then who?
That's the second half of my class. Then I go into the alternate candidates and then start talking about Edward de Vere, basically, and all of the material. And one thing I point out that I'll say, and I bet I may be put on the hit list for this, but I've said that, the supposed Shakespeare experts are really not qualified to answer this question. And let me explain. English professors, those are the Shakespeare experts, they're literary critics. They deal with opinion. Criticism, even very informed, very useful criticism, is still opinion. And for this question, who did it? Did he not? We need people who are trained in forensics. What constitutes genuine evidence as opposed to speculation?
Mm-hmm.
And what I give as a hypothetical, imagine a courtroom scene. I come into the courtroom and I say, Your Honor, I am the district attorney. I have been the district attorney for the last 30 years. I have gotten accommodations and great acclaim, and it is my opinion that this man is guilty. No, I don't really have any direct evidence, and no, there aren't any eyewitnesses, but I am convinced that this man is guilty. Now, also, I propose that you not even bother to listen to the defense of this man, because anybody who would take on his defense must have some mental problems, must be mentally deficient in some way, and this would just be a great waste of the court's time.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, as the district attorney, I say this man is guilty. I rest my case. How far are you going to get with that?
But that is exactly how most Stratfordians approach this issue.
That's true. And I've seen writings where they really think that opinion is the most important element in this. That facts are just, that's a little bit of supporting evidence, but it's our opinion that is the most important thing. And that's just laughable. But yet you get that, it's interesting. You get this kind of thing happening, hardly just in the Shakespeare authorship question, but in academia generally.
Now, how does, and touching on that, how does the University of New Mexico respond to your class? Do you have, obviously the administration is supportive of you offering the class because you've offered it so many times and you're going to be continuing to offer it in the very near future again. So obviously there's support at that level, but are there other, colleagues in the extension or people who are regular academia at the university who have given you any pushback on this?
No, I really haven't. I don't know that the English department even pays any attention to the extension program.
Sure.
I've always been waiting to see if I would get a heckler in class, and I've been prepared, but nothing of the sort. No, it's I don't think they pay any attention to it. I think that it's just the usual thing. Just ignore it. It'll go away if they're even aware of it.
Sure.
So,
and in the times that you've taught the class, you said you had one person who criticized the class because they were just absolutely adamant that they were not going to listen to any other option than the man from Stratford. But you haven't ever had anyone who's attended the class on purpose just to challenge you, just to call you out on things, or to tell you that you need to put your tinfoil hat on or that type of a thing?
Nope, I haven't. I really haven't. I've been prepared for it, but I haven't. One of the things I was going to bring up that I found out just recently that I will bring up in the class in the way of things that people think they know. Are you a baseball fan, Stephen?
Not particularly.
Okay,
I played as a kid. I grew up in Southern California, so the Angels were a team to pay attention to. So, but I'm not particularly. I'm more of a football fan, actually.
Well, it doesn't matter. But of course, you know who Ty Cobb was.
Oh, of course, sure.
Right. Well, it's just common knowledge that Ty Cobb was one of the greatest, if not the greatest player, most exciting player who ever played the game. It's also common knowledge that Ty Cobb was a horrible human being. He was a brawler, a drunker, and an avid racist. Well, there's a man, Charles Learson, who just wrote a new biography of Ty Cobb.
Mm-hmm.
And he set out, there hadn't been a biography in a number of years. And he set out to do some research to find out some stories that hadn't been told and all that. And what he found was that this story about the personality of Ty Cobb was completely wrong. As far as his racism, Ty Cobb was from Georgia, so you think, oh yeah, sure, he's a racist. Well, it turns out when you do some research that in fact he was from a long line of abolitionists. His grandfather was an abolitionist preacher. And that late in life, when Ty Cobb finally did make a statement about integration of the major leagues, what he said was, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, the Negro has every right to play in the major leagues and should be afforded the same respect as any other player. And more than that, he used to hang out with players in the dugouts of the old Negro leagues and talk baseball with them. This was what everybody knows was an avid racist, and it is completely wrong. And so the man has a new book out, and he's been on a lecture tour and everything to try and rehabilitate the reputation of Ty Cobb. This is something that was just common knowledge, and it turns out to be completely wrong. So that's something I just found out recently. But one of the stories that I love to tell in the class, and I have always told this, is when I was in the fourth grade, I had a desk that was on the aisle next to the wall. And on the wall was a great map of the world that I used to look at and study. And one day I said to my teacher, Mrs. Gray, it really looks to me like the east coast of South America would fit almost directly into the west coast of Africa. And she said, yes, dear, it does, but that's just a coincidence. Land can't move. Well, that was the official knowledge at the time. The theory of continental drift and plate tectonics was developed in the 1920s, and it wasn't until into the late 60s that the evidence became overwhelming, and finally, kicking and screaming, official academia had to accept that as the correct theory. So I feel that we, with the authorship question, are in exactly that position.
I agree, and I use it. I love that analogy, and the one the one that I always like to use is when you talk about when you talk about our knowledge of the universe. And one of the reasons why I like to use that example is because it was all happening during the time that these works were being written. This transference of thought from this geocentric belief system to the accurate heliocentric belief system. And
yes.
It was all going on right at the time that the author was writing these plays. And I believe that you can find some hints about the dating of the plays based on the writer's knowledge of that astronomical change, if I could use that as a phrase.
Yes.
The writer's knowledge of astronomy changes, and you can see it in the works, and you can tell works where he still has characters talking from a geocentric perspective, and then you can tell works later on where he has characters talking from a heliocentric perspective of what's going on in the solar system. And so I love that. I love that analogy about the tectonic plate shift. And I also used the one about, we thought that we were the center of everything for so long. And we have Stratfordians who believe that the Stratford man is the center of everything. But P.S., he that's wrong. He's just a planet, and he's not the correct planet. And our Star of England is the true sun of, see what I did there?
Yes, indeed. Well, that's it. And if when the experts are telling you you're crazy, this makes no sense, you have to present evidence to challenge the ongoing opinion. But I love the comment from Carl Sagan that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, to me, the claim that a man from a backwater town in rural England, from an illiterate family background, with no record of any formal education whatsoever, comes to London and immediately starts writing not only the greatest plays in the English language, but plays that are a virtual compendium of knowledge in all fields in the Elizabethan time, including intimate customs of the aristocracy, 3, 4, 5 foreign language, and does so leaving no paper trail whatsoever. That is the extraordinary claim. That's what requires extraordinary evidence.
Another one that I always bring up, and this gets forgotten a lot, and there's a recent episode that I have done with Bonner Miller Cutting about, specifically focused mainly on Venus and Adonis. And that's another thing that isn't brought out enough, and that is that this writer's name first appears in print on that piece of work. He comes on the scene not as a playwright, he comes on the scene as a poet, and he comes on the scene with an epic poem that in its time was, nearly soft porn, and it flies off the shelves for like 9 consecutive printings before we start getting all these plays. A year after Venus and Adonis hits, Rape of Lucrece follows it up. It's like, my debut album wasn't good enough. I need to come out with my second album, Rape of Lucrece, and it's a smash hit. Gold records flying off the shelves. And both of them are dedicated to this nobleman, this earl, in this flowery way. And I just can't imagine that there's any good answer for how that is possible from this country bumpkin.
Yeah.
And they don't want to talk about that. They never like to talk about those 2 poems. They never like to talk about those dedications to the Earl of Southampton, because it just raises too many questions that they cannot answer.
Well, if you don't see that as one nobleman talking to another, then you really don't understand the language of the period.
Exactly right. And you certainly don't understand the politics of the day. And that part of it, I think, is more crucial than anything. And, when you look at some of the plays and the talk that happens among characters so often about reputation and honor. And I think in today's society, we have a different outlook. I don't think we can truly comprehend what those things meant during the Elizabethan era and later Jacobean era, when it came to the politics of court and the politics of nations. And, we're, especially here as Americans in this big giant continent, in this big huge country, I don't think we even understand the interworkings of Europe at the time.
Yes.
And how crucially important all of that plays in. If you're in California, you can drive 450 miles and you're still in California. If you're in Europe, you could go through 5 countries by that point.
Yeah, right. No, it's true. You can't apply contemporary attitudes to the Elizabethan era. It just doesn't work. And as you say, imagine the idea of a country bumpkin coming to London and telling the aristocracy what the meaning of honor is. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean,
let me put it to you this way, aristocracy. Here's what I believe. Here's what I know. And you're all going to listen and never, ever chide me once for anything that I write.
Yeah, listen to me. I can tell you what honor is.
Yes.
Oh, that would have gone down.
Speaking of chiding, I did in a recent episode of the podcast, I did mention you because you had written to me before about some topics in the past. And it's one of the reasons why I asked you to come be a guest on this episode today. But I want to talk to you about this idea that you have been bouncing around that I did mention on the podcast a few episodes ago.
Yes, thank you.
About compiling a laundry list, as it were, of all of the ad hominem and critical attack responses that Stratfordians have fired away at us Oxfordians or authorship skeptics as sort of another layer of evidence of how virulent they are opposed to any inquiry into this.
Well, it's there's an old lawyer's dictum that in trying a case, if the facts are with you, argue the facts. If the law is with you, argue the law. If neither the facts or the law are with you, attack the other side. And that's what they do. They can't argue the facts, so they just attack the other side. Well, actually, I got this idea for putting together a collection like that from one of your podcasts, Stephen. You were talking with someone, I forget who it was, the guest, and you were talking about attacks that you had both gotten. And you actually mentioned sometime that you were talking with some Stratfordian who got so heated about it that you actually had some apprehension of physical violence.
Oh yeah, that's true. And it's one of those moments where you go, okay, I'm going to back off of this topic because this person is so angry and so impassioned by what I am challenging here that I need to just let it go because it's really disturbing them internally and you could see it happening.
Yeah.
And we have had a couple of different episodes that have touched on that. I know one particularly, I had a great episode and conversation with Professor Roger Strittmatter about the types of attacks that I know that he has received. And then I know not too long ago, I did an episode with John Brooks, who's a religious studies teacher who has his own podcast, by the way, that I mentioned at that time as well. Hard to Believe is what it's called.
I think that was the one. That.
And we were talking about how it's almost like a religion with people, and you're challenging their faith system, and and that's what brings out that kind of angry response.
Yeah. Well, now of course my profession is as a musician. Any classically trained musician will know of Nicholas Slanimsky's book, The Lexicon of Musical Invective. And what this is a collection of critical writings, critical reviews, absolutely trashing composers, beginning with Beethoven and going up to the middle of the 20th century when the book was written, where these critics just rip to shreds all the composers that we consider in the pantheon of the greats. And it's a fascinating read. Anybody who's not familiar with it should read it, or at least read part of it anyway. The greatest of the composers just absolutely ripped to shreds by critics. And the book serves all sorts of different purposes. But I think if we were to put together something that I'm tentatively calling slings and arrows, that's been used so many times, I think I need to find it.
It's one of my favorite old television series. It was a great series, a three season series about a Shakespeare festival in Canada.
The Canadian series, yes. Absolutely. But well, I'm hoping that anybody who has been subjected to this kind of verbal abuse, if they have held on to it, and I hope they have, specifically, honestly, if he's listening, I really hope Roger Strittmatter will contact me, because I know he's suffered a lifetime career of abuse from the other side. I hope he will send me, and anybody else who's been subjected to verbal attacks will send me those attacks completely anonymously, of course, completely anonymously as to sender, receiver, whatever. I have set up an email account
Oh, great.
for just that purpose.
Okay.
It's slings and arrows, all in words together, slings and arrows 21 at hotmail.com.
Slings and arrows 21 at hotmail.com.
Yes, right.
And if we have some records and I have some, I'll be sending you some.
Great.
If we have some records in our possession of attacks upon us by Stratfordians, ad hominem attacks, criticisms, insults, you want to gather all of those together in one compendium volume, and which will make some great reading, by the way.
I think so too. And it will be, in a way, it's turning their attacks back on them.
Sure.
As well as documenting just this phenomenon that I was talking about in the beginning, of people seeing what they want to see. And you mentioned an almost religious belief in something. I think it could be an important document, really.
There's an entry in the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship Who Wrote Shakespeare video contest from either last year or the year before. I believe it's Peter Dixon. I could have that wrong, but I believe it's him who did a great 3-minute video, and he plays both roles. He plays like himself as an Oxfordian asking the questions, and then he plays like a Stratfordian professor answering.
That is my dear friend Jonathan David Dixon.
Jonathan David Dixon. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
okay.
That is a great video. That is wonderful. If I can put in a plug, one of the questions that I frequently get asked, not so much in the class, but just from other people, is, what does it matter who wrote the plays?
Sure.
Which to me seems a ridiculous question. Jonathan has just done a brilliant video on that question. And in fact, it's one of the entries in this year's video contest on the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship site.
Oh, okay.
And
great.
I urge everybody to go to it and watch it. And if I can put in a partisan plug, vote for Jonathan David Dixon's What Does It Matter Who Wrote the Plays? I think it's a brilliant 3-minute video.
I'll have to look for that. Is it a similar style to the one he did about, the ad hominem?
Not only that, but it brings back the snotty professor character.
Oh, great. Okay,
which I urged him to do. I said, Jonathan, I love that snotty professor character. Please bring him back again. There's so much more you can do with him.
Amen to that. You could do a whole series with that snotty professor character.
I think so too. I think he should, and I'll urge him to do that. By the way, he's one of the librettists that I work with and the Gonzo Opera project. He's written a couple of librettos for me. He's a very, very talented writer and actor as well. So,
well, what a small world. So that's so funny that our conversation made me recall his video, and go figure that you know him well, and so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And for the listeners, you can find all of the entries at the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship website, or you can also go to their YouTube channel and find all of the entries from the previous years. And, obviously each year there's a winner, and, but the truth of the matter is so many of them are so good that it's hard to judge a winner in many cases, which is why it's left up to the voting public to decide every year, which one's going to get the top prize. But so many of them are so good, and you really should go and view them. They're a lot of fun.
It's great to know that there are so many people have so much interest in the topic that they're willing to spend the time producing a video for it.
Absolutely.
That in itself is tremendously encouraging.
Well, he's very clever. That particular back and forth setting that he does with those videos is particularly clever. And I just recall, him saying the things that he has found in print that Stratfordians have said. And I believe many of the quotes that he uses in at least the first video from last year or the year before, I believe many of the quotes that he uses there came directly from people at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust.
Yes, they did. They did. Yes. Those are some of the most vehement people. Yeah.
Right.
And they're the ones that are most fun to poke at.
Yeah. So I think your idea of collecting all of those statements, and they don't have to necessarily be. So there's another thing I would put out there to the listeners. If you have some of these that you're going to send to Daniel, they don't necessarily have to have been directed at you. If you have access, if you saw something in print, if you saw an attack, there are definitely articles and columns and editorials that have been printed in the past in newspapers, magazines, etc. Letters to the editor after a story has run. I know recently, last year or year before, Elizabeth Winkler put out a story in the Atlantic about could Shakespeare have actually been written by a woman, and got lambasted for putting that column in print. So if you, if you have any of those, send them to Daniel. And again, Daniel, it's slingsанdarrows21@hotmail.com. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Slings and arrows, all in words and all together. Yes. Yes, that's a great suggestion, Stephen. Thank you very much. Actually, just this morning, I got an email from Alex McNeil of the Shakespeare Authorship Fellowship,
Sure.
sending me half a dozen suggestions of places to look in that. So I think we're on the way, and I really hope this project does come to fruition, because I think it would be important, and I think it would be a great revenge for those of us who have been subjected to such attacks.
I think it'll be extremely valuable as another piece of work for those who come to this question and then start on their journey of exploration into the question to seek their truth on it. I think having in one place what all the reactions have been just puts another dot on the exclamation point of why this needs to be asked, why these questions are valid, why this research needs to be done, and that it is not so cut and dry. And, to use a Shakespeare quote, when you have that book all together, maybe the book needs to be called They Doth Protest Too Much or something along those lines, because that's what, I feel like it's Gertrude. I feel like I want to be Gertrude and say, methinks the lady doth protest too much a little. And that's exactly where these Stratfordians are. They protest so vehemently that I think it shows a weakness in their armor. And I'm going to look forward to this book. I also think the value in it is it's going to be very humorous and fun to read.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting some of these invectives that have been employed against people. So
I love the idea. And as you say, I don't know if I would call it a revenge tactic, but it certainly is, a fight fire with fire. One of the things that reminds me a lot of Beyond Reasonable Doubt, or Beyond a Doubt, the book that they came out with several years back, the Shakespeare Authorship Trust. And then the Oxfordians responded with their own book with the same title, but with a question mark rather than a statement. Why is that not the accurate title of that coming to my mind right now? But I think it's Beyond Doubt or Beyond.
Yeah, I have it right here in front of me, Stephen. It's the Stratfordians put out a book, Shakespeare Beyond Doubt.
That's it, right? Shakespeare Beyond Doubt.
Within months, our side put out the book with the same typeface and same layout, Shakespeare Without Doubt, big question mark.
Right.
And I quote from it quite a bit in the class.
Oh, good.
Especially the wonderful section by Alexander Waugh that I like, where he has a Stratfordian saying about Romeo and Juliet, there has never been a St. Peter's Church in Verona, right? And he said, well, we on the other side get together and roll up our sleeves and actually do some research, and we find that there are in fact 4 churches in Verona named St. Peter's.
Well, why wouldn't there be? I mean, he's St. Peter, for goodness sake. Isn't he? That's the guy. Upon this rock, I build my church. That guy. Oh yeah, I would think that in Italy, in most towns, there's probably a St. Peter's something in almost every town in Italy, I'm guessing.
But just the idea that the Stratfordian states categorically there has never been a St. Peter's Church in Verona. This is some armchair pundit who has never done a bit of research in his life, apparently, from this. And so that's why I said earlier, these people are just not qualified to weigh in on this authorship subject because they're not dealing in facts. Or when they try to be historians, they make mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake and really just embarrass themselves. So.
Well, Daniel, I'm glad that you're going to be working on this project, and I'm glad that we had a chance to mention and direct the listeners to some other resources, including the videos that are out there, and then those 2 books particularly, Shakespeare Beyond Doubt and Shakespeare Beyond Doubt ? Which, as you said, was the response that was issued, and you're right, very quickly. In fact, one of my fondest Oxfordian memories was being in the room the night that it was decided that book would be created and published as a response.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
It was at a dinner following a day of conference for the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship conference, which in that year was held in Pasadena. And after that day's events, a large group of people who were attending the conference all went and had dinner together, and that's where the discussion was held. And I remember being in that room and it being decided that that's what was going to happen. And then, like you say, within months, this magnificent piece of literature was produced, and it was definitely a finger in the eye to the establishment in a lot of ways. And I would love to see some more fingers in the eyes of the establishment. And I think that your project is definitely going to serve that purpose. So I want to encourage listeners who are tuning in to make sure, if you do have any access to these attacks or any print criticisms of Oxfordianism where they call us, oh man, what have they called us? Tin hat wearers, flat earthers, Holocaust
the brigade
deniers.
of kooks and cranks.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So it would be great to have all of that in print for everybody to have in one single volume to go, okay, here's their response. Here's their true response to all this research and all of these books that we've put out. Their responses are you're a bunch of wackos.
Yeah. Well, that's what people will see. On one side, you have facts and evidence. On the other side, you have personal attacks. So what are you to make of that?
It will be a very good resource. And, we're here in the Quiller Nation, we're very proud of the fact that we have listeners who have come to this topic in a variety of different ways and in a variety of different levels of knowledge or understanding of the topic. And as we always say over and over again, we encourage everyone to do their own research, to explore the topic in their own way through the books that they're interested in reading, through the websites they're interested in visiting, and come to their own belief. And it's like you say, that's one of the differences between us and them, as you started out early in this episode talking about that you don't say when you're teaching your class, I know the truth. You say, here's what the evidence is showing. Here's what people have found. We're all looking for the truth. And as you said very correctly, very astutely, if somebody found a treasure trove of information that proved something else, then that's what we would accept, and we would dive into that next.
Yes, I think that's so important to emphasize that we are looking for the truth above all else. And so if some piece of evidence turns up that doesn't fit our theory, then we need to revise the theory and come up with one that does fit all of the information. And as I say, to me, I have yet to find any piece of information that would eliminate Edward de Vere. Everything seems to fit him perfectly. That's how it stands. If that changes in the future, so be it. But that's how it stands today. And it just makes sense, and it just adds so much to the plays. As so many people have said, plug in Edward de Vere to the plays, and all of a sudden, so many things make sense. I know actors, particularly, I've heard many actors say, well, we like to go back to the source and get as much background information as possible. But when you do that with Shakespeare, well, the life of the man from Stratford tells you absolutely nothing about the plays.
That's absolutely true. And I think that's where a lot of our listeners find themselves when they discover this podcast series and they become a fellow Quiller. They start to become more and more intrigued with the mysteries. And I think that that's one of the things that is going to serve us well in getting to the truth, is the fact that this is such a great mystery and there are so many mysterious levels to it. And I think everybody loves a good mystery. And one of the reasons why our listeners tune in to this podcast every 2 weeks is because they want to know where does the mystery lead now, and are we closer to solving any of these mysteries?
What new piece of the puzzle have we found this week?
Exactly. Or in many cases, because as I say, many of them are, just exploring this for the first time or newly interested in it. What other layers to the mystery are there that I'm not aware of yet? And
yes.
I think you have helped us to shed some light on some of that today, and also thrilled to have heard and learned a little bit about Gonzo Opera, which I'm going to start exploring some of that as well. So you've turned me on to something new to start enjoying. I look forward to that. And remember, everybody, if you want to explore Daniel's satirical operas, you can do that by going to the Gonzo Opera YouTube channel. And if you are interested in contributing to his new endeavor, we'll remind you one more time that the email is slingsandarrows21@hotmail.com. Daniel, it's been a great pleasure to have you on the program and to have this conversation. Anything else our listeners need to know before we close up today?
No, likewise, Stephen. I would just leave everybody with the quote I got from Derek Jacobi: "It's great fun."
It is great fun. And one other thing I'd like to point out, and I'm sure that you have done this, and and if you haven't, then I'm sure you must have already signed the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt.
Oh, yes. I always put that on the handout that I give to everybody in the class, saying, please do go to the website and sign the Declaration of Doubt. It doesn't say that you support any particular candidate. It just simply says that you want to see more research done.
And that's why I was pointing out that document. That document, it does such a great job of saying this is why we need to keep asking these questions. And so, fellow Quillers out there, if you have not gone to the site to sign the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt, you need to do that. If you're truly interested in this and you truly believe that questions need to be asked, all you're doing when you sign that document is say that. All you're doing is saying that you agree that there is enough mystery here that we should continue to research this and try to get to the bottom of it. You can find that at doubtaboutwill.org, doubtaboutwill.org. Go on, add your name to the list. I promise you won't get hate mail. And you probably won't get any, I can't guarantee, but you probably won't get any ad hominem attacks from Stratfordians, but you might. But Go add your name to the list and add to the growing numbers of people who want to see the truth come to light about this topic.
As a friend of mine said, if you get attacked by Stratfordians, it's a sort of badge of courage.
I consider it definitely like a medal of honor,
Yep. Very good. Very good.
And I wear my Oxfordian t-shirts, and I wear my Don't Quill the Messenger swag, and I wear my Oxford lapel pin, and I wear them all with pride. And I love it when people see something like that on me and ask me about it as a conversation starter, and I can get into this topic with them. And so, folks, go out there and be a beacon to the world about the fact that we need to continue to research this topic. And if you'd like to be a better beacon to the world, you can pick up your own Don't Quill the Messenger swag. T-shirts and other items are available at the Dragon Wagon Radio swag shop. Go to dragonwagonradio.com, dragonwagonradio.com, click on the swag shop, and you'll find some really cool things, including masks. My Don't Quill the Messenger mask is one of the best conversation pieces that I have ever had. It serves me quite well in environments where I need to be masked, and it also serves me quite well as people say, "What is that on your mask?" So if you want to pick up some swag, you can do that. And remember, all the proceeds do help support this program. And we thank you all for being loyal Quillers. We thank you all for supporting the program and contributing if you can. And we want to thank our guest, Daniel Stephen Crafts, for joining us for today's episode. Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Stephen. Same here.
And remember, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.